Welcome into Payoff Pitch, Action Network's baseball betting podcast. We are presented by BetMGM, your NL East betting preview. We'll go team by team, dissect it, pick it apart. Brendan Glasheen, your host, with Sean Zerillo and Philly, not the Philly fanatic, he's not here, but his running mate, Anthony DeBundo, in the building. We had to have DeBundo here, Zerillo, for the Philadelphia Phillies representation. We'll get to the Phillies, DeBundo, bite your tongue, but we will go team by team and try to figure out what Zerillo and DeBundo like in the NL East. Very simple. All of our betting previews for each division are coming at you this week, so be on the lookout wherever you get your podcast, Payoff Pitch. You can also find picks from the pod during the season if you search Payoff Pitch Podcast in the award-winning Action Network app. And one other housekeeping note, I would encourage you for a bigger picture MLB offseason betting update. There was an episode, the first episode of the 2023 baseball season is available now. Sean Zerillo and Colin Whitchurch. Very nice breakdown, rule changes, and big picture stuff for the coming season. All right, gents, let's start with the Atlanta Braves. They are the favorite in the NL East at plus 135 to come out of the division. I know it's a three-headed monster up top, but someone's got to be favored. It's the Braves. They've made some additions to their lineup, upgraded catcher. Zerillo, how do we break down the Braves? I know you've been high on them for a long time.
Still high on the Braves. Dakota likes the under on their win total. They have their projection at 91.5. I have the Braves as the best team in baseball, as does Fangraph Zips. I have them at 96.6 wins. Fangraph has them at 94.6. The range of outcomes on Zips tends to be a little bit tighter. They don't generally have teams as low or as high as they end up finishing because they use more of a dead even 50% projection. I use a bit wider of a range of outcomes in how I project these teams because I think it more accurately reflects final standings. But the Braves were my favorite value bet basically from the midpoint of last year. I love their depth and their safety of getting to the playoffs just from a roster building standpoint. It's very difficult to imagine this team not at least getting a wild card spot, but I actually do like them to win the division. I see a bigger gap between them and the Mets than any other projection system out there, about a 6-win gap. I like them to win the division down to about plus 105. I like their pennant odds down to plus 440, and I also like their World Series odds at 9-1 or better. Favorite bets across the board. Obviously, all three of those correlate. There's some other props as well that correlate in there too. Matt Olson, RBI leader. Michael Harris, runs leader. Max Fried, wins leader. All of these sort of stat props, the fact that I project the Braves as the best team in baseball, all of those things sort of correlate together. So a lot of bets that are on my cards related to the Braves, but I think it all sort of ties into the same opinion.
DeBundo, the Braves win total projection 95.5. Zerillo mapped out some of the other places you can find where the projections stand, Pacoda, Fangraphs, etc. Last year, they won 101 games. How much of the offseason that they had, how much does that factor into where you feel on this team?
Well, every year that I've bet baseball, I have bet the Atlanta Braves to win the National League East. And every year that I have done it, they have won the National League East, and I'm not going away from my tried and true formula. We even got to add more last year at the trade deadline on them to catch the Mets and pass them. I agree with Sean on the Braves at plus 135. I think it's really interesting. You mentioned that they won 101 games, and then they won the World Series the year before. Well, Ronald Acuna they didn't have Acuna for the second half of the season in the year they won the World Series, and then Acuna was not himself last year. He had a 114 WRC plus coming back from that knee injury. I think he rushed back a little bit. He didn't get a normal offseason with the lockout. And then, of course, he came back about a month into the season. He came back stealing bases pretty quickly. So I think the peak athleticism is still there for Acuna, and the power was still there, the raw power. But he even commented on this throughout the season that his knee was not right and that he was playing through pain pretty much the entire season. The BatX projections have him at a 146 WRC plus. That's like a different player than the one that the Braves had last year when they won 100 games. So I think Acuna is going to have a huge bounce back year. His ground ball rate was 47%, which is 10% higher than any other year in his first three full major league seasons that he played. So I think you're going to see a ton more power from him at the top of the lineup. That'll make up for the loss of Swanson, which I think is notable. But they also got nothing from Ozzie Albies last year. And Albies was a pretty good player that had varying injuries that basically didn't play at all. And he's projected, 110 WRC plus with solid middle infield defense. So I think they have a potential to be even better than last year, the Braves. And they also only got 20 starts from Spencer Strider. They started him in the bullpen. He didn't start pitching until June or until May or June as a full-time starter. And then he was, on a per game basis, like the best starter in the National League. So Strider, Kyle Wright took a step forward last year. Max Fried's always solid. Charlie Morton seems ageless. Like, this team has so much depth. They added Sean Murphy, like we said, and I think they're going to get a different Acuna, a better Acuna. And I think that makes them the best team in the National League. So I agree with Sean. I love the plus 135. I think they're definitely they would be my pick to win the National League. I haven't put a future on them to win the whole league, but like I said, once again, we're going back to the well on Atlanta to win the division.
And a lot would have to go wrong if you place the World Series future on them right now or a pennant future on them right now. A lot would have to go wrong for you to really be losing value on that come playoff time. They're such a safe team to make the playoffs, and then even once they're there, they're built very well with their pitching depth, et cetera, to compete well against any team. It's hard to imagine you losing value on the prices betting.
Yeah, I mean, they got crushed in Philly in the playoffs, but it was a Spencer Strider who had not pitched in a month. He was coming off injury. And then it was Charlie Morton, who was also not right going into the playoffs. So, a lot of times, the playoffs are even more of a crapshoot now because of the extra team. But I mean, who's better than the Braves in a short series?
I can't understand looking at BetMGM because the Braves are 5th on the board at plus 950. Then you look up the Mets, who are projected to finish 2nd based on the odds in their own division, have the 2nd best World Series odds, only behind the Astros. Mets are plus 750, just like the Yankees. Of course, we know the Mets made a shakeup to their rotation. DeGrom out, Verlander in, joins Max Scherzer. Zerillo, they're at plus 140 to win the division. And just to map out where they looked last year, they cleared their win total handedly. It was 87.5 going into last year. They won 101 games, as we know. As you guys talked about, the Braves caught the Mets later in the season in that division race, and their schedule was just a lot easier down the stretch for the Braves. Mets this year at 94.5. How do you want to bet the Mets in 2023?
So my projection and the composite projection that I use with, as we mentioned previously, Pacoda, Zips, Davenport, would recommend betting an under on the Mets win total at, for me, 93.5 or higher. For the composite projection, I would say it's about the same because I have it at 92. So you would want something closer to an under 95 if you're looking to bet the Mets. I would wait until right before opening day. All the money coming in on the Mets, the fact that they're 2nd World Series odds. Now many people are going out there and betting the under on the Mets win total. So if you wait until right before opening day, maybe you get a 95.5 and 96. I mentioned that Picotta is low on the Braves, obviously high on the Mets. They have them 4 wins better. Davenport even. Zips has the Braves 3 wins better than the Mets. So just to reiterate where all of them stand relative to each other, last year, Picotta had the Mets winning 1.3 wins behind the Braves, and now they're like 4 wins ahead. So it's interesting that adjustment has happened, but Zips has been steady. I've been steady on the Braves being the better team since the second half of last year. I just think it's interesting to constantly reevaluate where not only your projection stands on teams relative to each other, but also where the rest of the market does. Not only the win total market, but the projection market. And then that's why I like to take an average bet. So there's no bet for me currently on the Mets. Like I said, I'm going to wait until closer to opening day. Hopefully we get an under 96, under 96.5. That said, this Mets team, in addition to all the money they have and not caring what they acquire on the payroll, they do have some top-level prospects, Ronnie Mauricio, Brett Baty, Francisco Alvarez, who can either come up and make a potential rookie of the year like impact, or it could be used as trade pieces, say Verlander or Scherzer gets hurt and they want to go out and acquire a Brandon Woodruff or Corbin Burns, who are expiring contracts this season. So I think the Mets have more of an ability to add pieces in season than the Braves do, just because they have higher level prospects. The Braves graduated some of their prospects like Michael Harris last year, Vaughn Grissom. So the Mets have more upside to improve in season just right now currently don't like where they stand.
DeBundo, no DeGrom, Verlander in. As far as their lineup, they missed out on Correa. That was a fun story in the offseason. Diaz and Nimmo are still in the fold, and they also extended Jeff McNeil. All that said, when you look at the roster, you're high on the Braves, so I'm taking it that you're not sold on the Mets to be the division winner. How do you want to bet the Mets, though, if at all?
I agree with Sean. I'm lower on the Mets. I think the biggest thing with the Mets is that they're so old. I mean, they are one of the oldest lineups and oldest rotations in the baseball. They are the oldest rotation in baseball. Verlander's 40, Scherzer's 38, Carrasco's 36. Quintana just had a great resurgence year at 34, but major question marks about him doing that again. And Kodai Senga's the young guy. I mean, he's 30, so and he's technically a rookie. I have decent expectations for him, but I just wonder about how healthy and how reliable we can trust some of these projections. As players get older, you get more inconsistent. You get guys that, fall off the cliff. You never know when it's coming. Scherzer's battled injuries for the last couple of years. Verlander just had an incredible season, probably arguably one of the best of his career. But, we talked about this, Sean, like Verlander was somebody we were fading because his velocity was down. His stuff isn't quite what it was. He had that grace period post Tommy John. He's now 40 and logged a ton of innings last year, including in the playoffs, went deep into the season. So I do worry a little bit about the starting pitching, top of the rotation. And then even just like the other depth pieces, the non-Edwin Diaz relievers are a little bit shaky to me. David Robertson had a ton of injury problems, had one healthy season last year, but he's 38. Adam Ottavino's 37 now. And then even the secondary outfielders outside of Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, finished last season injured, 34. Tommy Pham is 35. Mark Canha is 34. Like all of these guys are like the 2018 version of this roster would probably win the World Series. Yeah. But I just have major question marks about getting that consistent production. I like Brent Beatty. I agree. Is it Batty or Beatty?
I go back and forth.
Yeah, I don't actually know either, but I like him. I think he could be a good prospect.
If he's not good, you call him Batty. How about that?
Yeah, he's batty. Hopefully he's batting for the Mets. But Eduardo Escobar, too, at third base is 34. So there's just like a lot of old people on the Mets who they're expecting a lot of production from to fill out this roster. And I'm not saying all of them are going to fall off, but just a few of them do. This team falls short, in my opinion.
Nimmo gets against a lot of pitches, too. His missed time in the past. Scherzer was hurt at the end of last year. Like even the younger, I mean, not that Scherzer younger, but even guys 31 or younger are a bit injury prone as well.
Yeah, and that's what happened. That's what has derailed the Mets seasons in the past, right? It's always been the injuries and that they have to bring up a lot of random players by the middle of the season. Just because they had one great year last year doesn't make them immune from that. And they didn't really add power. Like we talked about, they didn't really have enough like pop in the lineup. They didn't really address it in the offseason. So I'm still skeptical of the Mets. I bet they're under last year and lost. I will probably end up betting they're under again this year, and we'll see how it goes.
And defense is going to be a horrific mess for them as well. They're just, I mean, age leads into that too. Yep. But without shifting, old guys playing on an island, it's just not going to be good. Starling Marte is going to decline eventually. Nimmo is not a real center fielder. He's probably more of a corner outfielder. They're a mess defensively.
And as Zerillo said, I think that's a good call to wait a bit on the Mets. Give it another month. Well, not a whole month, but a couple weeks before opening day when more public money might come in. On New York. It's also interesting. Justin Verlander only behind Garrett Cole as far as wins leader this year at BetMGM. So BetMGM's high on Verlander and just again, using the market. And then there's a bunch of guys at 25-1, Max Scherzer included, Fried, Arias, Burns, Manoah, etc. So the expectations are that Verlander and Scherzer, even at their current ages, can bring this team back to relevance or in the playoffs. Okay, on to the Phillies. Zerillo, we'll go to DeBundo first for this, so he can, he can show off his Philadelphia jersey and footy pajamas. Phillies are plus 300 to win the NL East. Win total 89.5 wins at BetMGM. Last year, DeBundo 87 wins, just a hair above their projection of 86.5. They reached the World Series, as we know. Don't take too long on this. Like, what's your projection for a team that just lost in the World Series, but they got most of their guys back?
Yeah, I think the market's a little high, I shouldn't say that. I think the market's about right from my personal point of view on like what I think they're going to do. But I think if the public narrative, the sentiment surrounding the Phillies, everything about them, everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid, everybody's excited, and this city's kind of expecting, 95 wins and competing right there with the Mets and the Braves. I don't see it. I still think there's too many holes. There's not enough depth. Zerillo, I know, is going to go into it more in depth on this stuff, but I think, we forget that just in September of last season, I was the one saying, like, my friends in Philadelphia were all in full meltdown mode. I was like, relax. They just need to get in. They'll be okay. They just need to get in. But they were playing below 500 baseball in the month of September. They were not hitting. Bryce Harper was in the lineup, but was still coming back from injury and was not himself. Now they're not going to have Bryce for the first 2.5, maybe 3 months of the season. TBD on that. And it's a very convenient narrative that the minute they fired Joe Girardi, Rob Thompson came in and everybody started playing better and they won a bunch of games and they played at like 100-win pace in the second half of the season. That's all well and good. But I think the market has them 3 wins better. That's about what Trey Turner's worth, maybe a little bit more. So I just can't quite get to the under, because if they were 86.5 last year, they did make significant upgrades besides Turner. Like Turner coming in at short improves their infield. I mean, he's a huge upgrade over Didi Gregorius, who started the season at short. Brandon Marsh upgrades the outfield defense over, it was Odubel Herrera was the projected center fielder. So like that's an upgrade. The bullpen, the starting rotation has a little bit more depth because of some of the young guys that they may be using here with Andrew Painter. Bailey Falter's shown some capable abilities as a back end starter. So I think the Phillies have improved the roster from what we saw last season when they were 86.5, and they went over that number. And I think they're going to be right around the number again. I just don't really think they're taking the step up into the next echelon of the National League as a regular season team. Another thing, like the bullpen should be better. I mean, the 3 main relievers in the first half of last season were Corey Knebel, Brad Hand, and Jerry Familia. None of them finished the season really pitching for the Phillies, and they upgraded the bullpen. I mean, Gregory Soto is fun. We'll see if we can throw strikes. Kimbrel. Jose Alvarado and Dominguez and Kimbrel. So like they added some pieces.
Is Kimbrel an upgrade?
I think he's not going to be asked to close every night, so I think he's fine. Like I think he can still be a good middle reliever for the Phillies. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is like everybody's going to be on them. But you've seen this before. My biggest concern with the Phillies, number 1 is depth, and number 2 is just Wheeler, Nola, Suarez all threw a ton of innings last year. Pitched deep into November. Now they're turning around pretty quick for a spring season.
Sean
so I'm
Zerillo.
pretty meh on the Phillies, like relative to the market.
Yeah, you started very high, and then right down the hill you went as far as how you feel. So that could be how the season goes too. They get off to a good start, but no Harper early. We'll see. And as you talked about, their additions. Zerillo, you're excited to talk about this team because this happens to be one of your favorite win total projections for the coming season.
Yeah, I have the Phillies at 84.3. I'm glad that Anthony mentioned right at the end the pitching deep into October. We've seen pitchers like the Nationals after their World Series run who got used heavily in the playoffs just implode the next season. It's a bit of an unknown with guys like Zach Wheeler who were injured during parts of last year, who have injury history previously. Aaron Nola, obviously very durable. But I would be a bit concerned about Wheeler with the extended workload in the playoffs, how hard he was pushed in the playoffs, things of that nature. Like, it's just added injury concern. But the reason my take this year is different than my take last year. I said the Phillies were my favorite long shot last year because they were built for the playoffs. I continue to believe that they're not built for the regular season. Their depth compared to the Braves and the Mets, I think, is much more shallow. They don't have as many prospects that are going to pop from their player development pipeline to potentially add to their current major league roster. So they're going to be reliant on trades. They want to make moves and add to that roster. If Bryce Harper comes back earlier than expected, certainly boosts their expectations. That's a bit of an unknown. Davenport, Pacoda, they're right around the win total. They're about 89.5. I do like the under here quite a bit, though. I would probably bet it down to about 87.5. That's roughly 3 wins compared to my win total. So that would be my cutoff, 87.5. MGM is still at 89.5 minus 120. I think that's a great number. That, to me, is probably in this division more of their ceiling. Just obviously they can surpass that, but just given the fact that they have 2 other 90-win teams in front of them, there's a lesser divisional schedule this year. You play 6 fewer games against each divisional opponent.
Yep.
I make the Cardinals a better team, I make the Dodgers a better team, and I make the Padres a better team, all than the Phillies. So I have them as the 6th best team in the National League. I think they're great. I still think they're going to be a threat in the playoffs, but just in terms of being built for the regular season, I like them to go under this win total of 89.5. I think they get a wild card spot, but they probably come in roughly where they came in last year, around 87, 88 wins.
I'm reading directly from Zerillo's MLB betting mega preview. Now I'm reading last year's, and you said what you just said now is exactly what you said at the time. You were not interested in the Phillies win total, or from a win total perspective. And as we know, you laid out some thoughts on taking them to win the division and also the World Series. And they were your favorite long shot a year ago. Almost. But
yeah, one thing, we hit their series prices all the way through there. Like, sometimes just doing the work beforehand can lead you to anticipating the bets that are to come. So even though we didn't cash the World Series future, the divisional future, we definitely made all that money back and some on their divisional series prices each time. And we kind of knew that going in, that they were going to be, a sharp playoff team because of how they stacked up. Wheeler, Nola, being able to roll that over is dangerous.
One more thing. Sean also did hit 20-1 on the pennant too. So that was cool. Thank you, Sean, for that. But, and thank you to the Phils, but I like Aaron Nola most wins, 50-1 at BetMGM. I think that's way too low. I think he should be up there with all the other, top arms that pitch every 5 days. He's going to make 30 starts. He does it every year. He's in a contract year. He was one of the best pitchers in the National League, K- walk. And he doesn't walk guys, so he goes deep into games. And the bullpen should be better this year. He's projected 15 wins by the bat. That's most of anybody in baseball. So at 50-1, I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mentioned I like Fried for most wins, and has the most by ATC. He's 25-1. I would actually prefer, because of the correlation again with my Phillies win total under, I'm not going to bet a Phillies pitcher for most wins, but I'm happy to bet Nola at Cy Young 20-1, and then Wheeler Cy Young 18-1. I think those are both fine numbers, considering where they stack up relative to the pitchers in their league. I just prefer Nola for the durability concerns on the Wheeler side and the price.
Miami Marlins projected 76.5 wins at BetMGM, or that's the current line over at BetMGM, 76.5. It was their same projection as last year, and they went under at 69 wins. Sandy Alcantara was a great story. He was just like, I remember, it's all coming back to me now. We would do payoff pitch Tuesdays and Fridays during the season. Stay tuned for that. And it would be a Sandy day. And Zerillo would say, all right, first 5. And we're just going to leave it at that. Not just Zerillo, everyone else, a lot of folks, all
the whole company had a Sandy Alcantara ticket.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. The preseason Cy Young ticket. That's right. That was very well documented early on. Tabundo, we'll get to you in a second because I think you're interested here in a win total play. Zerillo, how do you look at the Marlins? Are you, because if I remember correctly, you liked them over last year.
They were one of my 4 favorite bets last year in terms of win totals. I like their over 74.5 quite a bit, and I like it for a lot of similar reasons this year. Except I think their pitching is potentially even better. Obviously, they traded Pablo Lopez for Luis Ariz, but I think it helped to round out their team. And they have other guys like Yuri Perez, who's the number 2 prospect in baseball, who can come up eventually. They signed Johnny Cueto for depth. I think this Marlins team is due to pop eventually. It just has not happened yet. I like the over. The market really likes the over. I'm not the high man on the Marlins. I'm at 78.3. Pacoda is at 80.2. And every other projection aside from Davenport at 78 is above me. So the composite projection is 78.8, roughly 79 wins. I bet they're over at 76, even 76.5, you could argue. Again, there's correlation with the Phillies under. It is a difficult division with 3 very, very, very good teams, likely playoff teams on top of them. But I still think the Marlins are due to play like a 500 team at some point. They just have too much pitching depth. I like them leaning into the rules and adding guys like Gene Segura, Luis Ariz, who are going to not have to deal with the shift and just spray the ball all over that giant park. Those guys are both like 50-plus double candidates this year in that park with that big outfield. So the only concern that I have is them defensively without the shift, because they have not been a good defensive team. But beyond that, They do have a lot of young pieces that are getting better, and their offense should be better than it was last year. And their bullpen to lose so many games at the wrong moment last year. They've been unlucky. The Marlins at some point are going to pop. I know Tanner McGrath is like beaming right now as he listens to this breakdown, but I think Anthony has a lot of similar thoughts as I do.
Yeah, DeBundo, one of your favorite win total bets. That was Zerillo last year, but you for 2023, you're high on the Marlins for an over.
Yeah, I'm joining the party late. I wrote a column last week with my 4 favorite win totals. One of them was the Miami Marlins over. I agree with Sean, and I actually wrote first sentence. The off-season additions of Gene Segura and Luis Ariz seem to be leaning into MLB's banning of infield shifts. I mean, those are 2 plus contact guys who can hit the ball anywhere. They're going to put balls in play. I'm worried about the defense. Like Jazz is playing center now. Oh boy, that could be fun. Like Joey Wendell, Luis Ariz, Gene Segura infield could be interesting too. So I'm a little worried about the defense as well. But let's also remember, Jazz Chisholm was playing at an MVP level in the first half until he got hurt. He missed the last 100 games. He was, on pace for a 30-30 season. I think he could do that if he stays healthy this year. So that's like the power that was missing. And they were historically bad against lefties. They had this is hard to believe, 71 WRC plus against lefties last season. I'm just going to assume that's not going to happen again. Those are kind of outlier years that just don't happen in consecutive seasons. Obviously, El Garcia was terrible. Expect maybe a bounce back from him. They do have Trevor Rogers, who's a good bounce back pitching candidate who had a terrible season but has good stuff and should be able to figure it out. I don't really mind trading Pablo Lopez. I think he's kind of just a guy in that park. Makes their pitchers always look better than they are too. So I think it all helps. Alcantara is great. I think the rotation, Braxton Garrett's good depth piece. Like they have the pitching depth and they have enough of they're going to play differently. They're going to steal bases. They're going to, put the ball in play a lot. And I think it's a different way of playing. And I think it can be successful in a division with some shaky infields. We talked about this with the Mets and the Phillies. I don't like their defenses. I think that could help the Marlins too. So yeah, I like the over on the fish. Fish swim together, as Tanner likes to say.
All right, let's spend a few minutes on the Nationals. I'm ready for Zerillo to give out Nationals money line or wait and play the Nationals in like the 6th inning. That might be coming this year. Maybe not. Nats win total. You can see you smiling. Nats win total at 60.5. The projection at BetMGM last year they won 55 games. Their projection leading into 2022 was 70.5. 60.5 wins. My God, that is low.
Here's a fun prop. Number of Zerillo bets on the Nationals money line this season versus Nationals actual wins this season, which is higher?
Zerillo.
I'm going to take Zerillo money. I'm going to take
That's
Zerillo
like a
money
minus
line there.
On each side. It should be like number of bets against Patrick Corbin plus 30.5 against number of bets on the Nationals money line. That would be an even more intriguing because I'm betting against Patrick Corbin every time he starts. He should have lost 20 games last year. I'm generally not for calling professional athletes like wusses, but he sat out and avoided losing 20 games. So I thought that was a bit of a soft move by Patrick Corbin, a guy who prides himself on being an alpha male, by the way. Took the easy way out. The Nationals, 2 projections like them to finish around 66 wins, Davenport, Zips. That would recommend an over on their win total bet. I'm right along with their win total bet at 60.2. So no bet on their win total for me. Yes, unfortunately, we'll be betting this terrible team sometimes in game this year. They do have a future Hall of Famer, Joey Meneses, hitting 3rd in their lineup, so that's great. I'm kidding. Joey's great, though. You'll see him on Team Mexico in the World Baseball Classic. Phenomenal hitter. And I like C.J. Abrams a lot. But other than that, this Nationals team is 2 or 3 years away from being competitive.
Bundo?
Yeah, so the BatX projections, you want to guess how many above average hitters the Nationals are projected to have this season by the BatX?
2.
3.
The answer is 0.
Oh.
Even Meneses is coming into like a 98 WRC plus. So the leading hitter for the Nationals by WRC is Keibert Ruiz, the catcher, who has like no power at all and is projected 99. Good hit tool, might hit like 280, but no power. And Meneses could be, he's a good story. Dom Smith redemption tour at first, maybe. but I'm interested in the pitching. I mean, they have 3 young arms: Josiah Gray, Cade Cavalli, Mackenzie Gore. 2 of which they acquired in trades. All of them look like they could be okay pitchers. None of them look like they're gonna, light the world on fire. But just being an average MLB starter is probably what all 3 of them are headed toward, and that would be enough to be an interesting pitching team, and to be competitive in some games. But Patrick Corbin's a fade. Like, this is, I mean, I wanted to bet the under, and then I looked at the pitching and I was like, actually, they might be competitive in some of these games, but it's really hard to make the case given how bad that lineup is. Heimer, Candelario, 96 projected WRC plus, like all just terrible players. Lane Thomas, like there's not even like a ton of prospects that are on the brink. Like a lot of the guys they got are kind of mid to low majors or minors right now. So yeah, I got nothing on the Nationals.
Yeah, anybody on the current roster, even Gray, by the time the Nationals are ready to be competitive, they probably won't be around anymore. So maybe Abrams, but it's hard to imagine, more than Abrams, Cavalli, like 1, 2, 3 of these guys being on their next competitive team.
All right, Jets, before we go, just real quick, your favorite bet from the NL East. You guys mixed in a lot, some ideas on stat leaders or award winners, World Series. Zerillo, favorite one?
Favorite one, period. I mean, I'm with Anthony on the Marlins over. I know he's going to say that. I will go Phillies under 89.5 minus 120 at MGM. I just think the way that stacks up compared to my number, I like that down to 87.5. I do want to mention for props, Jazz Chisholm to lead the league in steals around 20-1. I have him projected second. I think he's going to take advantage of the new rules. It just comes down to health for him, really. And then same with Larissa Rise. I project a Rise second in hits per plate appearance. So hits is a product of playing time. If they just take him after the trade, jam him in the lineup every day against lefties, he's going to threaten the league for hits. He won the AL batting title last year. So a couple of Marlins props at 20-1, I think are really worth looking at as well.
Dabundo, your favorite pick from the NL East.
Well, I talked about the Braves and the Marlins, so I'll give out a different one. I don't even know if I said it during the Braves segment, but Ronald Acuna to win the MVP.
Yeah,
I think this is a bounce back year. He should be the second favorite after Soto, and Soto's seen a little bit of a decline in athleticism that we'll talk about on the NL West pod. But yeah, I'm riding Acuna this year.
All of our division preview. Oh, go ahead, Zerillo.
No, I'm betting 3 guys for NL MVP. Acuna is one of them. I think at 10-1, you just bet him every year. That's a great price.
All of our division previews available here at Payoff Pitch, wherever you get your podcasts. We are Action Network's MLB betting podcast presented by BetMGM. Please rate, review, subscribe. Don't forget you can follow the podcast. Payoff Pitch podcast will have picks during the 2023 baseball season in the Action Network app. Payoff Pitch podcast. For Sean Zerillo, Anthony Dabundo, Brendan Glasheen, thanks for listening